John Carter says the Braves D shuts out the Astros to clinch, and it was a big deal. Mike Q says he's feeling it this morning. A lot of folks certainly are. Maverick says world champs. That's great. John Carter says Georgia's coming. Allison Scaly says what a night, and it was a great night indeed. Jay Shipes comes over here to say fire up the YouTube. Jay, I'm happy to know that you're so nimble and moving across the different platforms. We will get rolling on the other stuff there too. Randy Hall says, let's take a look at that guest list for the game on Saturday. Yeah, I'm a little slow, Randy, in getting up on that, so we'll get Jeff Sintel going on that for sure. My God, a freshman says, if Georgia wins, you got to do the parade from I-16 in Savannah up 75 near Chattanooga. Yeah, you literally might have to do the whole state. At the very least, I think you may have to traverse the full length of 316 start that thing in Atlanta, roll that thing all the way through 316 to Athens. You may have people lined up on both sides for as far as the eye can see. That may indeed be the case. Ken Feinberg says a friend of mine said he saw Jordan Davis the Braves game last Sunday. Yeah, he's been at a few of these. Stetson Bennett was seen at one. Jordan Davis had the cool Braves jersey on. You have to wonder how big does the jersey have to be to kind of hang off him the way that, kind of where the jersey's kind of casually looking. So a lot of these Braves guys have been there for that. Really, really good stuff. Are we on the other platforms now? All right, so we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're on Twitch, of course. We'll keep rolling here on DawgNation.com and the DawgNation app. Big show for us. It's Mike Griffith stopping by. We'll hear from Kirby Smart on quarterbacks today before we're done. I think there's a really cool compliment that Kirby Smart gave to Zamir White. I want to begin with that, at least very near the very top of the show. But off the top to begin with, classy messages from Georgia celebrating the Braves win, and kind of a cool parallel given the fact that Georgia itself was also number one last night. But Kirby Smart says, don't make too big of a deal about that. So we'll kind of follow those instructions today, although maybe not quite to the degree that Kirby wishes we would. But it's all on the way next. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And it begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So when I was growing up, I had two grandfathers, and really my dad was like this too. They always used to tell a lot of jokes, and to some people they'd be corny jokes, but when you're a kid, you just think they're the funniest things in the world. And one of the jokes that my grandfather used to say a lot is there was this little boy, and his parents were getting a divorce, and the boy had to go in front of the judge when the parents were getting a divorce, and the judge looked at the boy and said, hey, who do you want to live with? Do you want to live with your dad? The boy said, no, I don't want to go live with my dad. And the judge said, why? The son said, because my daddy beats me. And he said, well, how about your mom? Do you want to go live with your mom? And the boy said, no, I don't want to live with my mama. My mama beats me. And the judge said, well, if you don't want to live with your dad, you don't live with your mom, who do you want to live with? And the boy said, I want to live with the Atlanta Braves because they don't beat anybody. And that was just kind of the way that it was back in the 80s. There was just this expectation that if you lived in Georgia, in the Atlanta area, whether it be Braves or Falcons, to a certain degree the Hawks there a little bit there as well, and even at that time, we're kind of post-Herschel Walker. We are in like mid to late 80s. Even Georgia wasn't doing a lot to change the narrative on this, that the expectation was that if there was something that were to go on in sports, the idea was the teams in Atlanta, the teams in Georgia, they're just not going to be very good. Like, I'm not old enough to remember when Sports Illustrated, back when Sports Illustrated was a big deal, wrote the Losersville story about Atlanta. But you better believe that the aftermath of that was still being, I was feeling the effect of that when I was growing up. And you're kind of left to believe, okay, well, I live in a state that has sports, but it's like the worst of the sports. It's like the worst teams that there are. Like, if this is Losersville, you start to sort of sometimes think, well, does that make me a little bit of a loser too? And I was thinking about all that last night, obviously, because the Braves broke through and they won a world championship. And I always had this vision in my mind of what it would be like to celebrate a world championship for one of my teams, or eventually a national championship for Georgia. And I have this picture in my mind of like this gigantic party where you stay up till dawn and you're doing all that kind of stuff. And last night, my story was actually a good bit different than that. I was sitting on the couch with my wife and my 9-year-old son, and we're wrapped up arm in arm, and he's living and dying with every pitch, even though the Braves are up big. My daughter, she's younger. She just wanted to go to bed. She had no interest in last night. But I did share this moment with my son, and even though it's not the big party that maybe you one time would have imagined for all of this, it certainly seemed to be pretty poignant, because what I was thinking about in watching all of this is that the way in which I grew up is now so different than the way in which children of that generation grew up. I grew up thinking that the possibilities were very limited. There was only so good one of my favorite teams could be, that eventually Georgia would bump into a ceiling in college football. Eventually the Braves or the Falcons or whomever else, they would bump into a ceiling. There was only so much achievement they had the capacity to enjoy. But obviously last night, whatever ceiling was in place for one of your teams, if you live in Georgia, it was shattered, and perhaps shattered forever. And for kids like my son, who's only 9, and so many of the young generation of folks who are your own children who were watching in last night, all of a sudden that's shattered for them, perhaps forever there as well. That when you watch the Braves do what they did, overcoming everything, the Ronald Acuna injury and the Mike Soroka injury that has lingered, and obviously acquiring some guys that weren't necessarily household names based on what they did before they got to Atlanta, Jorge Soler included. You put them on a field for the Braves, and they just find a way to get it done. And it's just one of the coolest sports stories. Obviously, for those of us who are partisans for the Braves or live here in the state of Georgia, it's a cool story. But in Major League Baseball, it's going to be remembered as one of the most remarkable runs to a world championship that's ever occurred. And as you might imagine, the University of Georgia, the team we talk about here on DawgNation Daily, they're a part of all of this. It's really fun right now to watch the way in which the sporting fabric in our state is connected. Matt Ryan, Trae Young, they've shown a lot of love for the Braves. The Braves have shown a lot of love for the other teams. Obviously, the Braves do the college nights each and every year. Obviously, they've shown a lot of love for UGA, and they do the UGA co-branded hats, and there's just a lot of connected fabric between all the different sports entities in Georgia right now. And it was cool to see the ways in which the University of Georgia last night was celebrating the Atlanta Braves World Championship. And for me, who obviously loves both these entities, growing up loving the Braves, growing up loving UGA, to see Georgia celebrating the Braves last night just made it even more enjoyable all the way around. Let me show you a few of these if you're watching on video, a couple social media messages. First of all, Georgia football here with a very nice looking edit, blooper, the Braves mascot, a great edit that says, "Congratulations, the Atlanta Braves, World Series champs," and the caption saying, "Brought it home." Indeed, they did that. I think it's really classy that Georgia's football program, as busy as it is right now, stopped for a moment to appreciate the Braves, but they weren't the only one. You had other UGA accounts kind of reaching out to celebrate here a little bit. I think the basketball team got involved on that one. Can we see the next one here? Yeah, UGA basketball showing you their own really cool edit here. They said they did it. Way to go, Braves. And they give you the World Series caption there. Love to see the Georgia basketball team getting involved with that. The athletics account showing you UGA with the Savannah Morning News paper when the Braves won in 1995. And there's UGA with the handshake with Blooper, the Braves mascot. That's a really cool photo. A great way to see the celebration. And then finally one more here from the official athletics account saying, "Ain't nothing finer in the land." And when it comes to Major League Baseball, they truly are the finest in the land, the Atlanta Braves. And a whole bunch of Dogs fans enjoying all of that too. And as I said on Twitter last night, it's obvious what's next. Like that this, for so many of us, is, I don't want to call it the appetizer of the main course. It's the first course to what's going to be a full meal. Let's say it that way. The first course to what could be quite a delicious meal rolling here for the next few months as Georgia tries to follow up on the Braves World Series win last night and win its own national championship. And there's a kind of a delicious symmetry to the fact that the Braves hoist the trophy last night. Georgia celebrates that at the same time that Georgia, the University of Georgia, UGA, the football team, was also number 1 last night in the first college football playoff rankings. Like, this is a lot of success for a lot of us to be able to enjoy, almost as much success as you could ever pack into a few days. I mean, it doesn't get much sweeter than go to Jacksonville, beat the Gators 34-7, spend some time there, that night watching a Braves get a World Series win, come back to Atlanta, see the Braves close it out. All of this in the last few days. I mean, how good is all of that? Only to have it then roll into big TV spot last night on ESPN with the first playoff rankings to see Georgia unquestioned as the number one team in the country. It's just a reminder that the fun we've enjoyed as sports fans these last couple of months, it may not slow down anytime soon. But this is where Kirby Smart steps in on all this. Kirby Smart says, if you want to see my team celebrate the way that team did last night, coming up with the big moments, getting the big hits when needed, making the big outs when needed, really stepping up in the pressure and playing well in the clutch. If you want to see the college football version of that happen come January and starting in December and rolling into all that, you're going to be very careful about how you talk right now. That the Braves were number one when you really want to be. They were number one at the end of the season. During the middle of the season, they were nowhere near being number one. But the only thing that anybody remembers is how you finish a season. So because of all that, Kirby Smart downplays the fact that Georgia's number one right now. So in light of what we saw the Braves do last night, in light of the fact that a lot of Georgia fans are now eager to see UGA follow in that path towards a championship, let's heed the warning here quickly from Kirby Smart. This after, or at least right before, Georgia was named number one in the first college football playoff ranking. This is Kirby Smart.
They've had this night 7 times, and I would dare y'all to know how many of those 7 actually won the national championship. 1's the answer. So my point would be to the players, and I made the point today and will continue to make the point, why? Why did only 1 of the 7 win it? And it's pretty easy because it either went to their head, it affected them, they didn't continue to grow and get better. And, the narrative out there will be, people will say, I'm not saying this because I certainly don't think it's true at all. But the narrative is what distorts young people's mind that they read on social media and things, that there's this, upper echelon of teams and then there's this other group. And I don't think that's the case at all. I don't see it that way. I see every team in that top 10, top 15 capable of beating each other any given Saturday. So what we better do is distance ourselves from everybody else and get better, because we got some tough roads coming down the pipe starting this week and every week to follow when you play in the SEC. I told them they could tune in and watch the Braves, but there's no need to watch the other.
I told them they could watch the Braves, but there's no need to watch that college football playoff ranking because in Smart's mind, being number one now is worthless. And I think he's probably for the most part right about that. I mean, while the number one ranking may not predict national champions very well, I would say that the top 3, top 4 predict playoff spots, at least in recent years, more often than you might think. So from that standpoint, he's probably on a little bit better ground. But overall, you definitely understand where Kirby's coming from and all of that. And I guess the feeling that it leaves me with is this. Thinking about Smart speaking there and the things that he's saying, that there may not be an established science for how you win, but there is certainly probably an established science in place for how you lose. And Smart's probably right about that the recipe for losing is thinking that you've done something in November when you should know that the real tests don't happen until December and January. And if you want to make the parallel to the Braves, that's exactly how their path was traveled, in knowing that they never gave up, they never gave in, they never listened to a voice in their head that may say it's too hard, it's too tough, it's too whatever else. They just kept right on going. And in college football, conjuring up whatever spirit that it is that allows you just to keep right on going, I'm guessing that's not an easy thing. That the level of buy-in that Georgia has seemingly gotten for itself this year, it's just kind of an uncommon thing. It's just kind of an uncommon degree to which this team seems to be on the right page. I think it was Nolan Smith that used the word blue collar the other day. The blue collar mindset this team has adopted, where they're willing to, including a bunch of guys who may one day be millionaires, they're willing to act like rank and file players here and share glory, share spotlight, share stats, share everything else. That I don't know how quite you get there, but once you kind of veer into that kind of vibe around a team, it's the kind of special thing that you do want to see continue. And if you're a coach, you don't want anything creeping into the discussion that might allow that energy to subside whatsoever. So somehow, some way, the Braves found it, and they wrote it to the tune of a world championship. And Georgia, for now, seems to have it there too. Kirby says, no guarantee that it stays that way. You've got to protect that mindset at all costs. And that means you got to ignore being number one right now. And so as much as we possibly can, we'll heed Smart's advice on this, that it feels pretty good to be number one right now. But when you see the Braves celebration last night, it serves as a huge reminder that it's going to feel even better when you're number one come the end of the season. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're glad to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We're on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. We're a podcast, all the various podcast players. I'm talking about the Apple Player, Spotify. We post the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com, the Google Player for the Android devices, and a lot of other platforms I'm not probably even aware of. However you're getting to us today, we just really, really appreciate you being with us. We've got a lot to say about the Georgia Bulldogs over the course of our time here together. That means Mike Griffith stopping by here in just a little bit. We'll get a lot from Mike about everything and how it's going to play out with Georgia on Saturday against Missouri, the aftermath of being ranked number one in the college football playoff rankings last night, what's going on with quarterbacks. We'll also let you hear from Kirby Smart on the subject of quarterback coming up here in a little bit too. So there's a lot to do with Georgia. Obviously, it's a celebratory day because the Braves won the World Series, but it's still a work day for us too. We got to get ready for a big game on Saturday and get you ready for everything else that's still to come with the Dogs here this season. So we'll do some of that with Mike Griffith here coming up in just a little bit. Before that, though, I do want to go around the doghouse, and it's furnished today by our friends at Rooms to Go. And there was something, and when Connor Raleigh joined us on the show yesterday, there was something that we, I think, kind of briefly got into there at that moment, and I think it deserves a little bit more of an expanded level of attention here. That very quietly, a guy that's emerging as a crucially important leader for this Georgia offense is Zamir White. White did go over 100 yards for Georgia on Saturday against the Gators, had the touchdown at the end that allowed Georgia to kind of put the finishing touches on Florida and kind of rose the stat level for Zamir White there. But really, White's contribution to Georgia extends far beyond the stat sheet right now. He is clearly so much more valuable than any statistic could ever tell you. And so I thought it was really cool when Kirby Smart yesterday, this is last night, when Smart's meeting with the media, and he was asked about Zamir White. And I thought Smart gave White a really fun and really cool compliment. It actually kind of got me thinking about something related to Zamir, about maybe an important role that he's helping fill for Georgia right now. So let me do this. Let me let you hear Smart talking about some of what he likes about Zamir White, and then I'm going to try to add my own words to this about why I think that's so important for Georgia in the moment that we're currently in. This is good stuff. This is Kirby on Zamir. Take a listen to this.
What he's done is incredible in terms of carrying the workload, the leadership, the work ethic. I mean, there's not a day he comes out to practice, he doesn't practice hard. And the best thing about it is he takes care of his body. He does a tremendous job. I see him come across my office outside my window right here where he's walking back and forth, and I'm texting him, "What are you doing?" "I'm coming to treatment. I'm leaving treatment. I'm getting extra treatment. I'm taking care of my body so I can be effective." And he's just a great leader.
Just a great leader, Kirby Smart says. And I remember when Zamir White committed to UGA. I believe it was June 27th of 2017. June 27th was his mother's birthday. I'm ashamed to say that I know Zamir White's mom's birth date better than I know some of my own important dates for my own family, probably from time to time. But that's how big of a deal it was back on June 27th of 2017 when Zamir White committed to UGA. He was the number one running back in the country. It was, at the time, I'd have to go back and kind of think about this, but I mean, it was as big a recruiting win as Kirby Smart had kind of had. It was one of the bigger ones, and this was kind of a rock star type name. This was, headline marquee type name that was coming to the University of Georgia. And yet all these years later, the thing that we think of when we think about Zamir White is not that level of attention, not that level of fame, but the kind of, I used the word blue collar a moment ago, the kind of blue collar mentality that defines so much of the rest of this team, that Zamir White seems to embody that there as well, taking care of his body. This is a guy that had 2 ACL injuries. This is a guy that's overcome a lot when it comes to some physical stuff in his career, and yet he's shaken all that off. He's become a very good football player, and he continues to take care of his body so that he can be available to Georgia week after week after week. And furthermore, there's no doubt that the thing that people outside the bubble of DawgNation think about when they think of UGA is clearly the dominant defense. And that's a dominant defense that has also, much the same way I said about White, a lot of former five-star guys who forego their own fame, who ignore their own hype, and don't pay attention to the fact that one day a lot of these guys are going to be millionaires, that one day a lot of these guys are going to be drafted very high and be a big part of some NFL team. But for now, they're willing to be an ensemble cast here on this Georgia defense. And that vibe creates such a valuable atmosphere around the Georgia program. It's the kind of thing right now that I think that Smart's very protective of. But you also want that to translate over to the other side of the ball there as well. And I think that Zamir White does a really good job of bridging that gap. Because clearly, Georgia, over the course of the last few years, has had more defensive than offensive success. But the mindset that defines the Georgia defense, you want that to go into the offensive meeting rooms there as well. You want that blue collar, never give up, fight at all costs. You want that mindset to permeate the offensive side there as well. And I don't think there's any doubt that Zamir White is helping lead the way in doing that. There really is, seemingly, at least in my mind, an intangible quality that's getting the best out of Georgia, and it's taking what's already a talented roster. And heaven knows we've talked a lot about the overall talent level for Georgia a lot over the last couple of days in contrast to what may or may not be going on at Florida. But talent alone is just not going to get it done. Talent alone is not going to get you across the finish line. You've got to have talent willing to work. You've got to have talent willing to lay it on the line. You've got to have talent willing to blend into the scenery and be a part of an ensemble cast and not necessarily demand to be the guy in the starring role. And the Georgia defense got that figured out to a large degree. And I think that Zamir White is certainly taking big steps towards helping define the Georgia offense much that same way there as well. And I just think it's pretty cool. And it's certainly really cool to hear Kirby Smart tossing those compliments around right there. It's around the doghouse. It's furnished today by our friends at Rooms to Go. And I mentioned last night, I'm watching the end of the Braves game there in my living room. I got my family with me, and so many of you kind of doing the same thing there. Well, obviously, when you look around your living room, the place you call home, it feels good when you got great furniture. And when you live in a well-furnished home, you just feel good about that. And that's where Rooms to Go can step in for you, whether it's a piece of furniture or the entire room. That's why they're called Rooms to Go. They've been famous for doing that for a long time. In the hot real estate market that we've been in, a lot of folks are calling a brand new spot home for the first time here, and that means for a lot of you, that means getting some furniture to fill in that new home, or maybe it's just a home you've been in for a while, but you want it to feel new again. Well, Rooms to Go can do that for you too. Dining room furniture, bedrooms, living room, outdoor patio furniture, as folks continue to make better use out of their outdoor living space. All of that is what's possible for you when it comes to Rooms to Go. You can start your shopping experience by just walking to one of their showrooms and sitting on the furniture, laying on the furniture, feeling with your hands. That's probably my favorite thing to do. But a lot of people also like to start their shopping experience online. So Rooms to Go can allow you to do that too at roomstogo.com. Rooms to Go, furnishing around the doghouse here today. All right, it's DawgNation Daily, and we got a lot to do. We'll let you hear from Kirby Smart before our show is done today on the topic of quarterbacks and what's going on with that. So we'll cover all of that with you before we are done. But for now, on everything else related to a busy time for the Dogs, number one in the playoff ranking and trying to figure out how to stay there by the end of the year. Let's get ready to talk about all of that right now with a Georgia Farm Bureau practice report with Mike Griffith here on DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will say hello to Mike Griffith, a part of a Georgia Farm Bureau practice report, and we'll get a lot from him on what's going on with these Dogs. But, Mike, before that, I do have to ask, I am curious, we've seen you wearing I call it the Ty Cobb style hat, the Detroit Tigers hat on cover 4. You obviously went to Michigan State. You're, I think, from the state of Michigan, but you've lived in the South here for a long time, too. Have you spent much time as a Braves fan around the Braves, watching the Braves? Well, what did the World Series win for the Braves last night mean for you?
Not much time for that on the Georgia BA. I got a number one football team that keeps me pretty busy and happy for my neighbors and happy for you. I see you enjoy your Braves fandom with the jersey, and I know Connor invested some time there and some of our other staff members. So I'm happy for those people that are loyal and invest a lot of their time watching television or going to the Braves games. I'm glad that they were able to get some satisfaction and some enjoyment out of watching that professional franchise win a championship.
Mike, I was talking about Zamir White before you joined us. I thought Kirby Smart gave him a really cool compliment last night. And, I think that the statistics only tell part of this picture, although White did exceed 100 yards on Saturday, that I think, and Smart calls him a valuable leader. I don't think there's any doubt that the vibe that exists in the Georgia defense, that Zamir White's helping also instill that on the offensive side of the ball there as well. I think he has been, but he's becoming even more of an important part of this team. And frankly, a little bit of an unsung hero, I believe, for why Georgia has been as good as they've been this year. I've certainly been very impressed with what I've seen by Zamir White. What did you make of what Kirby Smart said about him last night, audio that we heard a moment ago?
Yeah, Zamir's a hard-working, well-liked guy that Georgia's invested a lot of time and effort into. And, I think he's playing better now than he has at any point in his career. He's still not among the top 10 SEC rushers, and I think there's about 15 guys averaging more per carry. But, what he does well. He runs north and south. He runs physical, and I think he's given himself a chance at getting drafted. Anytime you've got a guy that works that hard, that takes care of his body, I think it sets an example for the other guys in the running back room. And it's been important for Zamir to step up with Kenny McIntosh missing some time with a hamstring and Kendall Milton out. I think James Cook has also had a really good year. But to your point, Zamir's been a good citizen. He's a good guy. I was glad I had a chance to run across him last week and shake his hand and tell him how impressed I've been with this north-south style that I'm seeing. It looks like he's really trusting his legs more and, hitting daylight at 100 miles an hour. And there's no doubt that's when he's most effective.
I just think that when you put him in the category of former five stars on this team that have really completely ignored their own ego, and I just don't think, Mike, that you can say enough about how that factors into the overall success story for Georgia this year. And obviously there's more important games still yet to come, and the most important games still haven't been played. But much the same way the Georgia defense is defined by, the Trayvon Walkers, the Nolan Smiths, and the Adam Andersons, and the guys like that are willing to be a part of something as opposed to the marquee name kind of above the fold, name in bold print and lights. They're willing to kind of blend into the scenery. I think that White kind of functions a lot that way on the Georgia offense there as well. And I think that when I think about what's been enjoyable about Georgia this year, it to me has been really the selfless nature of the team. And I don't think that's common in this current age of college football where we live in, where the degree of buy-in that Georgia's gotten right now is not the industry standard. In fact, if anything, it's probably the outlier. And so when I think about the things for me personally that I appreciate about this team right now, I think White does a good job embodying that beyond the fact that he's just been a good running back for the last couple of years. I think that his spirit around this Georgia team is pretty valuable too.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the temperament across the board, whether we're talking about Jamari Salyer or Jordan Davis or JT Daniels or Stetson Bennett. I think, Lewis Seen, Nakobe Dean, I could go on and on. But the fact is this team hasn't won anything. And they did get beat down and embarrassed by Florida and Alabama last year. After all the hype, that was supposed to be the best defense ever last year. And they got embarrassed in the two biggest games of the year. So they've been humbled, and, they've taken that humble pie. They've chewed on it during the offseason. They struggled to beat Cincinnati, albeit they were missing some guys, but so was Cincinnati. Needed that JT Daniels last-minute drive with no timeouts and Kenny McIntosh in there. This is a team that has something left to prove, BA. For all the five stars, they don't have anything to show for it. They got nothing to show for it. Georgia, I don't believe they've been the biggest underachiever in college football, as someone from the Big Ten, one of the Big Ten ESPN writers wrote earlier this year, conveniently overlooking Michigan, I might add. But I do think that there is something to be said for all the five-star talent and the empty trophy case. And I think this is exactly the team that's taken upon itself, to change that. And I do think they're going to win the national championship. And I do think they're going to beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. And I don't think they're going to lose again because of that approach that you're talking about. It's not just Zamir, it's everybody. I think, Kirby's got everybody bought in. And, everybody's in this thing. Everybody's in this thing together. And when a team is able to put the team ahead of itself, and when they hold one another accountable. You don't see guys getting into trouble off the field this offseason. That's a really good sign. And, that's a level of responsibility. I mean, there's a reason, some guys are on the team and some guys aren't on the team, right? This is an all-in thing for Georgia football, and it's really been a special season with a lot of heroes from one game to the next.
Georgia was ranked number 1 last night in the college football playoff rankings. Kirby Smart, obviously, very much stuck to the script in downplaying all of that. That's the kind of thing you'd expect him to do. But I think it's also, while what Smart said is undeniably true, that you want to be there at the end, not right now, and maybe believing too much in that would be the kind of thing that would injure some of the team chemistry stuff that I talked about a moment ago. I think it's also factually correct that it's still better to be number 1 than not, because you're obviously starting the month of November in a pretty good place. So overall, what did you make of the Dogs being number 1 last evening?
Yeah, there wasn't much mystery. There wasn't much suspense in it. It's interesting to see the other teams, but as you said, this isn't Georgia's first rodeo. They were number 1 once before, and they promptly got knocked off by Auburn. So I think Kirby's going to make sure that doesn't happen again with a little bit of a history lesson last night. I really enjoyed that. Kirby, when he holds court, can be really entertaining when he finds a topic that he wants to talk about. You can see why he's such a great coach and such a great teacher. And I enjoyed his discourse on that. I've had coaches tell me it's harder to stay at the top than get to the top. But again, with this Georgia team, I think it's a little bit different. I think in some ways, that uncertainty at quarterback almost, it's almost like Kirby's keeping it stirred up. I mean, he could settle it pretty quickly and easily, but, it just kind of keeps everybody on edge. I mean, Kirby likes to say, get comfortable being uncomfortable. I think he wants the fans to do that too, because he's dragging everybody along with this painful quarterback situation. But, it is a competitive team. We're seeing different guys come back from injuries at different points of the season. I think that keeps the competition up for positions. I think there's still the potential. I mean, if Jermaine Burton ever gets back on the field, I know Terrence Edwards told us how great he would be. Hopefully someday we'll see that. Ladd McConkey in the meantime has done a good job. A.D. Mitchell, Marcus Rosemey-Jack saying another one of these guys talked up. I think he's got 3 catches all year. He's got unfinished business. So the good news is there's still guys with something to prove out there. And as we mentioned, the quarterback situation, which changes the dynamic of the team.
So when I look at the and we'll get into the quarterback stuff here in a moment, because Smart obviously had a lot to say about that yesterday. But when I look at the playoff rankings from last night, when I think about the teams that I think of as the greatest challenge to Georgia, I don't know how closely they align with what the committee did last night, at least from the top 4 standpoint. For instance, I don't think a team like Michigan State's much of a threat to UGA at all, but a team like Oklahoma, that was ranked, I think, only 8th last night. We'll look more close to the ratings in a moment. That's the kind of team that I would think would certainly create for an interesting matchup, because they are going to put pressure on you to score some points, much the same way that the Rose Bowl at the end of the 2017 season worked out. I feel the same way about Ohio State to a degree. They were ranked below Oregon, the team that beat them head-to-head earlier. But if I'm a Georgia fan, I think that there's a greater challenge in beating that Ohio State team than this current version of the Oregon team. So when I think about the rest of the rankings around Georgia, it's really that Bama, Oklahoma, Ohio State. Those are, for me, the teams that I think are maybe the most likely to be in the playoff right now, and also the ones that, if they do make it, present the most significant threat to Georgia too. What do you think about that?
I can't include Oklahoma in that conversation. They got shut out by Kansas for a half. I mean, that's one of the worst teams in college football. They're inconsistent. They're not a good team. They've slid by. So I don't think Oklahoma this year, I know what you're saying about the scoring upside, but it's an awful program, and I'm glad, relative to the other unbeatens, and I'm glad that the College Football Committee finally got them out of there. I mean, this is a program that hadn't won a college football playoff game yet. Their moment of glory was losing to Georgia. That's as good as Oklahoma's football has been the last 10 years, and that was the best Oklahoma team, by the way. We had the Barry Trammell, the Oklahoma City columnist, on, and he said that was by far and away the best Oklahoma team that he's seen this millennium. So this ain't that. Ohio State, absolutely, a lot of perimeter speed that might be able to reach out and get into that Georgia secondary with enough pass protection. Nobody's been able to do it yet, though, Brandon. I'm with you. Michigan State. Mel Tucker's doing it with Mears. He's probably Kirby's biggest competition for Coach of the Year. Probably the number 1 target for LSU as well. Alabama's certainly a threat. Georgia just assumed get rid of them in the SEC championship game, so they don't have the potential of facing them again. I'm seeing it's a bold pick from national analysts that are picking Alabama to beat, including David Pollack, by the way, that are picking Alabama to beat Georgia in the SEC title game. I think that's an interesting pick. I think it's also insulting to what Kirby and Georgia have done this year. I don't know why you wouldn't think Cincinnati would give you a good game again. Azeez Ojulari isn't here anymore, and Nolan Smith has improved, but he's not Azeez. And Des Ridder is a really good quarterback, and that's a game program that would feel confident playing Georgia again because they went toe-to-toe. And yes, Georgia was missing a few guys, but let's not get carried away. Cincinnati was missing some really good players, too. So I think Cincinnati could be a threat. I think Ohio State could be a threat. Those would probably be the two in Alabama, obviously, but I think you're going to knock them out in the SEC championship game. So it's intriguing. It's always interesting to see how these programs get ranked in the college football playoff. And you're right. It's nice for Georgia to be sitting there in the catbird seat.
So let me do one more quick thing on this, then I want to talk to you about a couple other things. Let's say that Georgia beats Alabama in a close way in the SEC championship. Mike, you were one of the guys in 2018 that thought a close loss for Georgia, its second loss of the season, by the way, a close loss for Georgia to Alabama would be good enough to get Georgia included in the college football playoff that year. Are you telling me that you think that a close loss for Alabama to Georgia would eliminate it from college football playoff consideration? Because I'm not quite so sure about that.
Yeah, I think it's fair to speculate. Depends on, if there's other unbeaten teams out there. I don't think you could take a two-loss Alabama over an unbeaten Cincinnati or over an unbeaten Oklahoma, even though I don't think a whole lot of the Sooners, if they go unbeaten, or even an unbeaten Wake Forest. I think the committee would have a hard time taking a two-loss SEC team over a Power 5 undefeated conference champion. I just don't think you could do that in this day and age. A two-loss Alabama over a one-loss Oregon, I don't know. I'd need to see the style points. I'd need to know how they lost to Georgia. Part of the reason why I thought Georgia belonged in that year was because Oklahoma was the team that got in ahead of them, and I thought Georgia was clearly better. And I think time proved that out as Alabama jumped out to a 28-0 lead on that Oklahoma team in 16 minutes that Georgia had narrowly lost to. But politics are a part of this. There's no denying that, and it's very hard to predict, as Kirby Smart said, what metrics they will stress from one year to the next.
It's our Georgia Farm Bureau practice report with Mike Griffith here on DawgNation Daily here today. Now, obviously, Georgia Farm Bureau taking care of folks running the state of Georgia have been doing that for decades. And so many of the folks in our audience, they're working hard, trying to get to work each and every day. And obviously, for the people who are making it happen for our state and keeping the train on the tracks, so to speak, the way we need for it to around here, dependable transportation is a big part of that. And when you think about dependable transportation, the other thing you're thinking about is dependable auto insurance to go along with that vehicle that matters so much to you. That means you want an auto insurance provider that keeps its promises to you. And that's what Georgia Farm Bureau has been doing literally for decades all across the state of Georgia. These are folks that live and work and operate in the communities just like yours and mine all across Georgia. I'm talking about friendly agents, local claims adjusters, folks right there on the scene, arm's length away from you that are taking care of you for one of the most important decisions you can make, how you protect the vehicle that gets you where you need to go. That's what Georgia Farm Bureau does for folks all across the state of Georgia. They're always the home team. You can find out more about them by checking them out online, gfbinsurance.com. That's gfbinsurance.com. That'll get you in touch with Georgia Farm Bureau. All right, Mike, let's keep our conversation going here a little bit. A couple other things I want to hit with you quickly before we have to say goodbye to you. I feel like I've had a little bit of a handle about what's going on at quarterback with Georgia, at least an explanation that's made sense to me, and I've talked about this in the show the last couple of weeks, although admittedly, and we'll let the audience hear the audio before we're done, admittedly, I thought that some of the stuff that Smart said about quarterback yesterday probably muddied the waters for me just a little bit. I didn't quite know what to make of what Kirby said, other than the fact that he's just simply not going to take the question head on of who's starting on Saturday and what's exactly going on there. You were a part of that conversation last night. You had a chance to see a little bit of practice earlier this week. Obviously, you also saw what happened on Saturday against Florida. What do you currently make of what's going on for Georgia, the quarterback situation? And I guess give me some context, what you think that Smart had to say last night.
Well, I thought he gave some background when he was asked why he didn't put J.T. Daniels in. He said they have a conversation before the game on who's going to play, and they have a conversation once the game starts. And when Stet was asked after the game, when he was told he was going to start, he was told it was his game. That sounded very personal to me. That sounded like one former South Georgia high school player to another who recognized the importance of the Florida game in Stetson's life growing up. And what happened last year when Stetson was injured with a 14-0 lead. And, I think Kirby wanted Stetson to have his moment. And he did. Stetson was able to win that game, and he'll go down in history as the Georgia quarterback that beat Florida in 2021. And it's been a long ride. Kirby said, he's known Stetson a long time. This is very personal for him, and this is a guy that he has a lot of respect and love for. It's pretty clear.
So are you saying?
But
let me stop on that for a second because I want to make sure I understand what you're saying correctly. Are you saying that Kirby Smart chose Stetson Bennett for sentimental reasons? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if it was all sentimental. I think he said continuity was the word that he used when he explained after the game why he started him. But I think that's part of the story. I don't know. I wouldn't say that he just picked him because because he goes so far back with Stetson. But I do think that part of the story is Kirby's relationship with Stetson and the loyalty that he feels towards Stetson, certainly. And I think that played out. I think he explained why he didn't put JT in. He said late in the game, he didn't use JT specifically, but he pointed out in some games you just want to run out the clock and it doesn't really help you to hand the ball off. And then he pointed out in other games you want to keep scoring, and he used Carson Beck throwing a pick six against UAB as an example. So reading between the lines, it was kind of like, why would you put JT in just to hand off in the second half? I mean, there was, at that point, Georgia had a pretty commanding lead. Now, we can always speculate what would have happened if the defense hadn't forced that 21-0 run. Would there have been a quarterback change if the game was still 3-0? We'll never know. The information that we do know, Brandon, that's pertinent to this discussion, is that the quarterbacks continue to split the reps. And I think that if Kirby was going to go with Stetson moving forward for the remainder of the season, I don't think you'd be splitting reps at the one. So I think it's not a matter of if but when JT gets his opportunity, and we'll see how the team responds. The last time JT played quarterback, they scored 35 points in the first quarter, and he got pulled out. So the last time we saw him, he looked pretty good. It was Vanderbilt, but Stetson came in the second quarter and only scored 3. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how they practice. I think that's probably why he didn't announce anything. Is I think there is a competition. I think Kirby is evaluating it every day, and I think it's going to be on JT to show that he's still the best quarterback.
Yeah, so what's that going to take, Mike? Because you say that you think that eventually JT Daniels does regain this starting job, and obviously we're hearing from some Georgia fans, probably the majority of Georgia fans, that kind of hope that's the case. Not all Georgia fans. There's some Georgia fans that seem to be in the Bennett camp, but a lot of Georgia fans kind of wondered why Daniels wasn't more a part of the story against Florida. So if he's splitting reps right now with Stetson Bennett, in your mind, what's it going to take for him to regain the reins of this team once again?
It's hard to say with Kirby. I think, though, that, I think you've got to be aware, if you're Kirby, that you're creating an image of the program. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think you're pretty solid with, in this next recruiting class with your quarterbacks, but I think you're kind of making your bed for the future. I mean, what is the reputation of Georgia football? Is this a 2-quarterback program where, if you come in and you get injured, you lose the job, and you get replaced, and you don't get the job? Is Kirby a guy that's going to play 2 quarters? Is that what you're signing up for if you're Arch Manning? Do you want to compete in this type of scenario with week to week, not knowing if it's your job? I mean, now these are unique circumstances. With JT coming back from injury, I think it's a very unique circumstance. And certainly Stetson is a very unique and special player to this program. I consider him a folk hero. Stetson is a wonderful, popular guy, and Kirby has certainly rallied the team around him. There's a lot of favorable press for Stetson Bennett. A lot of the local media goes out of their way to ask players how much they like Stetson. And it portrays a very, very strong image of Stetson Bennett. So this is what Kirby Smart wanted. This is Kirby Smart's team, and he's going to do what he wants. So when you're asking me what is it going to take, that's hard to know because Kirby's going to do things the way he wants to do it. Right now, they're one of the most run-heavy teams in the nation. I think they're 5th in the country, and you could say that that's because they've built up leads, but honestly, the last 2 games, they haven't looked good in the first half. They scored 3 offensive points before, the defense triggered a 21-0 flurry. And the week before against Kentucky, they only had 14. So they've been getting out to very slow starts of late. Teams are bracketing inside receivers. They're forcing Stetson to throw outside and to throw deep. And I know everyone talks about how much he's improved and his great mobility. And so Stetson's having to compensate a little bit. And we just don't know, other than what we saw at practice, what JT Daniels can do. It's an unknown. And I don't know where JT's confidence is at. I mean, you've pulled the wheel from him. This is a guy that, he started out 8 of 9 against South Carolina, and you pulled him out and put Stetson in because Stetson deserved to play. And then the next week he starts out 9 out of 10 and you pull him out. So I don't know where all that's at, Brandon. I don't know what the future holds. If Stetson comes back another year, does JT decide to come back to Georgia? Does he transfer somewhere else? Does he go pro? I mean, there's all sorts of repercussions for decisions that Kirby has to consider, but ultimately he wants to win a championship, and that's going to be the determining factor of how and when, or if, he brings JT Daniels back.
What do you make when a guy like Nolan Smith is so effusive in his praise of Stetson the way that he was, unprompted on Saturday? He had every opportunity not to say that, but he still did. Do you take anything from that somehow, some way, some of these Georgia players that are so crucial to the Dogs right now, that Bennett seems to have earned their belief, even if he hasn't quite fully earned the belief of Georgia fans?
I think it goes back to something you said earlier this year, Brandon, that Kirby Smart's the only one that could make the quarterback situation a distraction. And I think he has. And I think there's a potential for I don't think it's happened because I guarantee those receivers are eager to get JT Daniels back. If you take a look at the numbers, if you're a receiver right now, it's not much fun because they're not throwing to the receivers. They're throwing to backs and tight ends because of how the game plan goes, let's say. And if you're a receiver recruit, do you sign up for this? Again, I mean, we're kind of back into the ground and pound that Kirby's comfortable with. And I don't know what JT will have to show to make him. It's good that the defensive guys feel good about Stetson. I mean, pretty sure Nolan Smith's kind of a South Georgia high school football player. But I don't think, is it a situation where kids from California and other regions of the country, are they going to be shy about Georgia over something like this? I don't think so. There does seem to be some regionalism here, a little bit with Nolan. He wasn't asked about it, and yet he felt the necessary to say that Stetson was his quarterback. And Kirby was asked about that, and he kind of tried to brush it off and say, well, he'd feel that way about anybody, but I don't know. Like I said, we talked to the receivers. I know last week Ladd McConkey felt strong that JT looked really good in practice, and it didn't look real rusty at all to him. So I guess it depends on who you ask.
Well, I guess my point, and I'll let you go after this, Mike, because I don't want to take too much of your time, is that there's no doubt this has created kind of a stir among fans. But when you hear Nolan saying the things that he's saying, and other players there as well, their comfort, as guys like James Cook and Kyrus Jackson have said, with whoever's back there playing quarterback, that we can stipulate here, based on what's being said publicly, there's no evidence whatsoever that any of this quarterback stuff has been a distraction for the team at all, right?
Yeah, not publicly. I mean, I guess we find out, what happens after the year, what direction the program's going in. We find out if Todd Monken comes back to run an offense where you throw 15 or 19 passes a game. You find out what receivers and quarterbacks are interested in. It's too early to say. We just don't know the direction of the program. We don't know what Kirby Smart wants. We know that Kirby doesn't mind playing 2 quarterbacks at Georgia. He's not averse to quarterback controversy. As I said, B.A., I think you nailed this long ago when you said the only one that could make this a distraction was Kirby. This is how he chooses to play it out. Of course, people are going to ask him who the starting quarterback's going to be. That's only natural. Nobody's trying to be divisive on the outside here. This is how big time sports works. This isn't some small high school program, and I mean this is a national program, and Georgia is under the microscope, and Kirby's under the microscope, and analysts are watching, and high school recruits are watching, and families are being affected, and promises have been made, and you recruit somebody, and people put trust in the school, and Kirby's got a lot of things to manage here. It's a lot, and so I know he's doing his best. I know he loves Georgia, and he wants to win a championship, and he's got a lot of loyalties to his players, and it's pretty fascinating for sure to watch. I'm just a fly on the wall here. I'll be real interested to see how it plays out for Georgia. But right now, I don't think it really matters who plays quarterback because this defense is so doggone good. Kirby can win it any way he wants.
All right, well, Mike, that's good stuff. We appreciate you being here as a part of the Georgia Farm Bureau Practice Report today on DawgNation Daily. I'm trying to figure out which camera. I'm still getting used to this. I'm looking at every camera in the studio. The point is, Mike, thanks for being here, and we will look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, Brandon.
Good stuff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So in our new studio, we have two monitors. We have one monitor that's supposed to be on this side of the studio that I'm pointing to my right for those who are not listening or are not watching your listening radio podcast. And so when I'm looking to the right, I can see which camera is pointing at me. I didn't turn that monitor on this morning. It's a little bit of a new thing for us, and so I'm having to look over my shoulder to see what's being seen on camera. The point is, interesting stuff there from Mike Griffith. Like, the one thing I'm going to continue to push back very hard on is this idea that, sentimental Kirby, he's just choosing Stetson Bennett because of, like, whatever reason might exist for that. Now, as I said, based on what Kirby Smart said yesterday, and I'm going to play the audio, or at least part of the audio. I can't play all of it for you because we don't have enough time. But I didn't quite understand what Kirby Smart was talking about with quarterbacks yesterday. This idea that a quarterback can't come in the game just to hand off at the end of the game. I wonder what Justin Fields thinks about that, because certainly that seemed to be a little bit different story back in 2018. But the point is, to stay with the modern times here, the current season we're in 2021, this idea that, well, Kirby's he's just so sentimental, man. He's just got that special place in his heart for Stetson Bennett. I mean, how many times do you think that Bennett would probably go back and think, if this is what a sentimental level of favoritism looks like, then how come he got kind of like basically tossed aside after the 2017 season after he'd been a walk-on? Then he coming back on scholarship, was basically disregarded going into the 2020 season, comes in, becomes the starting quarterback, really helps Georgia. At least one game, the Arkansas game, they would have lost without him, yet was given no chance to be the starting quarterback here this year. And I'm talking about coming into 2021, you don't really get the sense he was given much of a chance to even be the backup, and yet comes in, saves Georgia's bacon again. So I think if you're Stetson Bennett, and listen, that's not me saying Stetson Bennett should be the guy and JT Daniels should be cast aside. It's got to be Bennett's team. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's always, in my mind, been a misunderstanding that somehow Kirby just, got that special place in his heart for Stetson Bennett. Stetson's been kicked to the curb now multiple times. So I don't really quite know exactly what you do with all of that, but clearly there's some interesting stuff going on there with the quarterback position. And ultimately, I do think it's good news, and I said this a moment ago, and I'll say this again, then we'll roll on. I do think it's really good news that while this is a huge topic on a show like this, and obviously it's an even bigger topic for Georgia fans, you see in our comment sections, and you see everything else, it's the kind of thing that comes up all the time. There is no evidence right now, though, that this is any distraction whatsoever of the team itself. I mean, you hear a guy like Nolan Smith, who laid his life on the line in that win against Florida on Saturday, who's going out there and playing at an incredibly high level, and guys like him, whatever's going on at quarterback, as unorthodox as it may seem to some of us, there seems to be a level of comfort with the Georgia players, the guys who matter in a discussion like this, the guys that have contributed to the overwhelmingly positive team chemistry that seems to define Georgia right now. They seem to be comfortable with all of this. And if they're comfortable, then who am I not to be comfortable with it there as well? All right, let's transition now. Let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. And, of course, Royal Caribbean, great time to be back on those Royal Caribbean cruise ships right now. Fun time to be doing all of that. Beautiful weather out in the Caribbean as you head towards the end of this year and into the start of 2022. Not too early to start thinking about some of those 2022 vacation plans. And, of course, a Royal Caribbean cruise, a great vacation to be able to take because it can be very easy. Port Canaveral, just a short drive from where I'm right now. That can be a very easy thing to be able to do. You can be able to enjoy that. You can go to Perfect Day Coco-K. It's actually kind of fun. With the baseball, Royal Caribbean's had some TV commercials running during the baseball, and you've got a chance to see. They have that really cool, I guess it must be a drone shot, maybe a helicopter shot, but it's like a drone shot kind of looking down on the helium balloon, and you see the expanse of Perfect Day Coco-K. Those commercials have been all over the place for the World Series, so you probably saw some of those. And it just looks like the most fun thing in the world to do. I can't wait to get a chance to hopefully enjoy that myself here really soon. That's just what Royal Caribbean does for you. Really puts together as much of a fun, just wild, beyond your imagination type vacation. So get ready to enjoy that if you have not done that. The Cruise and Vacation Authority is also the outlet we would tell you to go to do the best job of booking a Royal Caribbean vacation for you. We think that the Cruise and Vacation Authority is going to take great care of you on that. So let me give you a way to get in touch with them. You can find the Cruise and Vacation Authority at tcava.com. That's the website, tcava.com. You can also give them a call, 770-952-8300, 770-952-8300. That'll get you in touch with the Cruise and Vacation Authority. As we get into our SEC through here a little bit, cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean, I do have to confess one thing, that we're trying to shorten the shows just a little bit, that I've gotten to a tendency, like we're blowing past the hour mark on these shows, and we got the number one team in the country. It's easy to understand why. But if I'm looking for an easy way to kind of tighten up the show just a little bit, shorten it just a little bit, the idea of the SEC through is not even starting until the SEC through music is coming to an end. That's probably one of those places. If we're looking to get some time back, that might be one of those places that we can get that. But nonetheless, we soldier on. And Georgia was number one in the playoff rankings last night. I want to show you this graphic from ESPN. We'll look at the rest of the top 25 there for a moment. I'll give you a few thoughts on what else kind of jumped at me from last night. So I think you see a pretty good battle, first of all, coming in the SEC on Saturday between number 13, number 14 teams in the country in the base of the playoff ranking, Auburn and A&M. That is really fun. When you look at the top, I mean, you heard Mike a moment ago making a case for Cincinnati. But the truth is, Cincinnati was sent a very direct message last night, and it's not an unsurprising message if you've been hearing me as of late. Cincinnati is not invited to the playoff conversation. Now, you can say that's unfair. You can say whatever else. But if they're only sixth last night, they're never moving higher than that mark. If it comes down to a comparison between Cincinnati and Wake Forest, maybe they get the nod over that. But as long as you've got Ohio States and Alabamas and even a team like Michigan, who I don't quite think we're done hearing from as of yet. I don't think they embarrassed themselves when they lost to Michigan State this past Saturday. Certainly in Oklahoma. As long as there was those kinds of options available, Cincinnati is just not a realistic choice for the college football playoff. And it's not because they're a bad team. They did play Georgia very tough a year ago. They got the win at Notre Dame earlier this year. That is the best win for a Group of 5 team in the college football playoff era. It's not enough. And if you're one of these teams that thinks Cincinnati deserves more consideration, here's the thing you have to understand, that Cincinnati itself is making it too easy on the committee right now. Go back and look at the Tulane game from last week. They, played around with Tulane a little bit before finally pulling away there at the end. Didn't look great the week before that against Navy. So in what is, in my mind, a down American Athletic Conference compared to what it's been in the past, right now Cincinnati's not getting these dial-a-score wins that give you a real chance to make the strong argument for them. It's too easy to disregard them right now. And as long as the committee has permission to do that, that's what it's going to do. Cincinnati at 6 is a clear indicator they're just simply not a part of the playoff discussion going forward unless something really, really weird happens from here. Beyond that, we told you yesterday going into the talk last night that the Oregon-Ohio State discussion was going to be interesting. And the committee does give the head-to-head nod against Oregon right now. Now, here's my feeling on head-to-head stuff. I think head-to-head matters to a point. Like right now, to me, it would be weird not to have Oregon rated higher than Ohio State. Just given the fact that Ohio State scuffled a little bit with Penn State on Saturday and really haven't proven a whole lot beyond what Oregon's done this year. I think the one loss Oregon had, I think the offensive coordinator, Joe Moorhead, was not even with them there that day. So, a little bit of a mitigating factor for the one loss that Oregon suffered here this year. But for now, head-to-head matters. However, head-to-head matters only for me up to a certain point. Ohio State still got big games yet to come against Big Ten East competition. That's not a bad division. And eventually, Ohio State's going to put together the kind of resume, I believe, that will distance itself from Oregon. Even though Oregon has the head-to-head win, Ohio State's going to finish the year, if it keeps winning, with better wins than what Oregon's going to have. So eventually I believe that Ohio State overtakes Oregon, assuming it keeps winning, and I guess that's probably my most reasonable prediction that it will. But assuming it keeps winning, it eventually flip-flops Oregon, but ranking Oregon ahead of Ohio State is probably the right choice right now. I thought it was a little bit weird that Oklahoma was rated as low as it was, but that's not – can we see the graphic one more time? I'll react to this a little bit more. Oklahoma at 8. I think the question you have to ask yourself is, what has Oklahoma really done that's all that much better than what Wake Forest has done? Maybe the comparison there to the unbeaten Power 5 teams, maybe that's what keeps Oklahoma at 8. But the truth is, if Oklahoma keeps winning, they'll eventually have the conference championship. That gives the committee permission to move them up if that's what they want to do. And I said before, Michigan may have lost to Michigan State, and that's another kind of butt of jokes for Jim Harbaugh, who seems to come up short in big games all the time. But I don't think a Michigan team's quite been excluded from this discussion yet. I think they may still be heard from there a bit. And you have to wonder. I mean, there's a very good chance that Wake Forest goes 12-0. Now, you see Pitt right now only at number 25 after having lost to Miami this past Saturday. That's a marquee win that an ACC team could have gotten that doesn't feel quite so marquee anymore. But it's not impossible to think that the committee could be looking at a decision of a 13-0 conference champion Wake Forest that really has beaten a less impressive group of teams probably collectively than what Cincinnati's beaten. So what would you do with an undefeated Wake? I guess I'm not quite so sure. I'm sure the committee hopes not to have to consider any of that. And that's your college football playoff top 25 from last night with Georgia on top. And that is Cruise Around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And here on DawgNation Daily, let's turn our attention. We just heard, a lot from Mike Griffith on the subject of quarterbacks before. I told you, to me, the quarterback thing for Georgia has been pretty straightforward, that JT Daniels, up until recently, has not been practicing enough to take back the reins of the starting quarterback job. I think lately he's been practicing more, taking a step. If you're JT Daniels fan, you would say hopefully taking a step towards being able to be what he once was, the unquestioned starter of this team. Admittedly, yesterday, though, when Smart was asked some of these questions, including I'm going to play you a little sequence here of being directly asked, will Stetson Bennett start on Saturday? I didn't totally understand everything that Smart said about all this. So let's hear Kirby being asked directly about Stetson Bennett and Smart taking the topic where he wanted to go. This for your informational pleasure.
Will Stetson be starting this weekend? And in regard to JT shaking off, any rust, how much of a necessity is it that he's able to continue to do that in these 4 remaining regular season games?
I think it's important for both of them to continue to develop, make good decisions. I mean, part of playing quarterback is accuracy, decision-making, mobility. Those things are the critical factors. I mean, anybody can hand it off. We all know that. And anybody can make our run checks and decisions. But it's the decisions when the ball's in your hand and you're having to make decisions where you're going with it, where you're throwing it, all those things that are the biggest deciding factors. But, yeah, I'm pleased with where both of them are.
Is Stetson going to be starting again?
Like I said, I'm pleased with where both of them are, and I think both of them are doing a great job.
So that's Kirby Smart kind of going with that where he wants to go. And, I don't think you can fault the question there. It's direct and to the point. Will Stetson Bennett start? And, Kirby Smart's prerogative to answer it however he wants to. I continue to be of the belief that you've got to protect the image of both these quarterbacks within the locker room itself. You've got to protect JT Daniels' image because the guy that's been playing for you, Stetson Bennett, who's to say that he keeps playing at the level that he has been playing? The Florida game seemed like a step back. It's a reminder that, at one point in time he was, air quotes here, just the backup quarterback, and at some point he may start playing like that again. So you got to have a JT Daniels that's built up in the eyes of the team so that you can turn to him. But conversely, Daniels, who was named the starter at the beginning of the year, named the starter at the beginning of spring, something that Smart has not done very much. He's also just not been healthy, not been fully effective. And you can point to the eye-popping stats against South Carolina and Vanderbilt, but those are bad football teams. You go back and look what happened against Clemson, you're left to wonder, that more meager statistical performance, was that because Daniels at the time wasn't completely healthy and then was not able to play in some games after that. There's a chance that even if Daniels is healthy now, may not be healthy fully for you for the rest of the season. He could get hurt again, or one of those injuries that he's dealing with could flare back up again. So therefore, you've got to protect the reputation of Stetson Bennett within the locker room too, because you may go back to him because once again, Daniels is no longer available to you. And I guess in a roundabout way, that's what Smart's doing. It is a very difficult needle to thread. I won't pretend to know all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes here. But I will conclude by saying this, and I said this with Mike Griffith, I'll say it now. Obviously, the quarterback position is the thing that can impact team chemistry more than anything else. But look around. Look at the way that Georgia has thrived here this year. Not just the defense. Think about the emergence of guys like Ladd McConkey and A.D. Mitchell, and think about the way in which Brock Bowers is, in the conversation as the top tight end in the country. I mean, a lot of that has happened on Stetson Bennett's watch. So it's not just the defense that's thriving right now. There's some offensive guys who've certainly had some fun here right now. And overall, the entire team seems to be enjoying itself. The entire team seems to truly be bought in. And so, it remains to be seen how Smart handles these quarterback decisions for the rest of the year. But certainly when you look at the way those decisions right now are impacting the chemistry of this team, you don't see any evidence of anything other than, I guess if I'm using a double negative, you don't see any evidence of anything other than right now this team being completely bought into the scenario regardless of who might be playing quarterback. And I certainly think that is a really good thing. Let me tell you something else I think is a really good thing before we get ready to wrap up here. That's the Finnish long drink. Now, you've heard me talk about the Finnish long drink before. It comes to the United States from Helsinki. Go back, to the 1950s. And you've heard me tell you before that when you go to longdrink.com, you see the 4 different varieties. There's the traditional, comes in a blue can. It's got the grapefruit citrus flavor. There's the Long Drink Strong, which is 8.5% alcohol by volume. Long Drink Zero, no sugar. The Long Drink Cranberry, which is, as you might expect, cranberry. My wife loves that, by the way. And a lot of you have been saying, well, which is the right long drink for me? Well, the cool thing now is you have these 8-pack variety packs where you get 2 of each of the 4 different varieties of the long drink. So you can try your own version of the Finnish long drink and decide which one you like the best. That's a really cool thing. And if you want to find out more about this, including where you can pick some up, check out thelongdrink.com today. That'll tell you where the Finnish long drink is available near you. It's somewhere, I can promise you. You can pick up that 8-pack variety pack right now and try them all and decide which one you like the best. So check out the Finnish long drink there today. All right, I got a really cool golden shoe submission today. I'm going to give a shout out to someone who's actually turned out to be a little bit of a Nostradamus, if you will, with some pretty good predictions. So let me show you this on the screen. This is our golden shoe winner for today. I got this tweet. It comes from Justin Rams, who says, my prediction on September 4th, he says, let's go. So here he shows his own tweet. He's showing his work here. This from September 4th. He says, bold predictions. Georgia wins the national championship. Braves win the World Series. Rams, led by Matt Stafford, win the Super Bowl. So understand this. When this tweet was sent on September the 4th, the Braves were only 71-65. They lost that day to the Colorado Rockies. So we were a long way away from what the Braves became. And Justin on September 4th, the same day that Georgia beat Clemson, by the way, called them out to win the World Series. Rams are also at 7-1 right now, I think. So these predictions working out pretty well here. So maybe that Georgia prediction comes true there too. Also, let's do our Gatorade countdown. 360 days from now, Georgia back in Jacksonville, beating up on those lousy, stinking Gators again. We'll see you tomorrow, right back here on DawgNation Daily. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Of course, R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. R.S. Andrews shows up on time. They do the work they do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That's what R.S. Andrews will do for you. They will take good care of you there today. All right, so let's get some comments. You can get into whatever you want to get into. Celebrate the Braves. You can talk quarterback. You can just have some fun with the fact that Georgia's the number 1 team in the country. It can all be very good, and it can all be very fun. Hopefully it will be. Trevor Maffetone says, this might be the one thing that brings all of DawgNation together. He says, not that I don't even think DawgNation's all that divided, but he says, Trevor Maffetone says, and I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, he says, I think that Jordan Davis needs to start at quarterback. I would definitely be in favor of that. The almost like the Jared Lorenzen style hefty lefty type thing. Now listen, Jordan Davis could eat the hefty lefty, Jared Lorenzen probably, but still, you think about the big guy at quarterback. That's one of the things that comes to mind. it also brings to mind for me, Devontae Wyatt did play some running back. I think he even returned some kicks every now and then, but did play some running back. So maybe Jordan Davis could just come play quarterback, and maybe that'd be the one quarterback that every Georgia fan would agree on at that point in time. Trevor Maffetone says, also, what's your honest opinion? Who starts on Saturday? I guess I think it's still going to be Stetson Bennett. I guess. I really don't know. As I said before, I think that Smart either unintentionally or intentionally muddied the waters yesterday with some of what he said. You heard Mike Griffith say, well, if Daniels is taking some reps now, that means he thinks he's eventually going to retake the job, and maybe that's true. But as long as he's not taking all of those first-team reps, it leads me to believe that Bennett's still at least going to play a good bit. I mean, the one thing that's been the most surprising to me was, and I did not see this coming, which was Daniels not playing at all against Florida. I guess I assumed he'd play some. That's what was surprising to me. Smart did talk about continuity after the game, but that was what was a little bit surprising, that, you saw Bennett get the series during South Carolina, and we were led to believe after the game, even though that was a pick, that he had earned that during the week. And we had been kind of told, at least publicly, that Daniels had a return to practice here this past week, and he was getting those reps, and he was taking those snaps, and he was doing those things. And so I guess I kind of assumed that, much the same way Bennett played some against South Carolina in a game that he didn't start, that Daniels might play some against Florida, even though he might not start the game. And then when he didn't play at all, I was a little bit surprised at that. As it stands right now, I'm just having fun with this team, and I'm trying not to get too obsessed with the quarterback thing one way or another. I do believe that that Daniels is probably the guy that gives Georgia the best version of itself. I do believe that, but I'm also not that worried about it right now. I'm not. I factually believe that Daniels is probably the better of the two, but emotionally, as long as the team's going out there and throttling people by 20-something points or whatever, I'm just not going to allow myself to get that unhappy about it, even if it seems somewhat weird. Let's see what else. Corn Allen says, come on, Kirby, either you're elite or you're not. Obviously using Smart's own words against him there maybe a little bit. Let's see what else is going on. Tom Peters says Smart only plays quarterbacks from South Georgia. I don't think that's true. I really don't. This idea that somehow, think about how driven and ambitious Kirby Smart is. This idea that somehow that he would, choose a quarterback because of geography is, with all due respect, the single dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And I'm not saying that you're dumb. I'm saying that idea is dumb. I think that you're probably just joking or being sarcastic. But that's just beyond ludicrous to think that somehow Kirby Smart, who is as driven to succeed, as driven to be the best as he possibly could be, that somehow he would get tripped up by, first of all, that's just one of the craziest things I've ever going to hear. Let's see what else. Memphis Dog shouting out Matt Robinson being interviewed by Buck Belue, but that was probably a good conversation. Jeremy says being extremely dominant on one side of the ball isn't going to get it done. He says, let me go back and read this. He says, look at Oklahoma, basically meaning the reverse, that good on offense, not good on defense. And I actually think you're right, Jeremy. I do think this is the one thing you got to be really careful of, is that in some respects, this isn't all that different from what's happening in 2019 around here, when at the time people were also wondering, could Georgia win a national championship on a team led by defense? And we found out that no, you couldn't do that. LSU was just too powerful offensively to think that your defense was going to stop them and that you were going to match them with what you were doing offensively. However, I would say that Georgia in 2021 is a little bit different on both sides of the ball. First of all, even though that defense was statistically stellar, this defense is better because they're more impactful. They're getting more sacks. They're getting more negative havoc-type plays. That this defense in 2021 is a far cry from an attitude standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint. They're just more aggressive. The 2019 defense suffered from not being aggressive enough, much the same way that sometimes you think, well, maybe Georgia's a little conservative on offense. I thought that at that era of Georgia football, they were a little conservative on defense, and that's not the case anymore. Much more impactful defensively, I believe, this current version of Georgia is. Also, this Georgia offense is better than it was in 2019. And so you're going to say, and your overall premise, I believe, is correct, but you can't win a championship with a defense here and an offense here. You got to have a little bit more, balance between the two. And I understand your larger point, and I will admit I've thought about this a lot myself. But I think it's important to say that the Georgia defense is actually here, and the offense is actually a little bit better than it's been. I mean, if you want to go back and look at, and I know this is not a perfect comparison. But let's look at the 2019 Georgia schedule for a moment. And here's something you're going to see. Let me just very, very quickly pull this up. I'll try to be as fast as I can. All right, so here's the schedule then. So let's get past the third week of the season. So week 1, 30 points at Vanderbilt, 63 versus Murray State, 55 versus Arkansas State. Let's look at Georgia that year in the games that would come after that. Just 23 points scored against Notre Dame, 43 against Tennessee, although one of those was a defensive score. 17 points in a loss to South Carolina, 21 against Kentucky, 24 against Florida, 27 against Missouri, 21 against Auburn, 19 against Texas A&M. They did score 52 against Tech, just 10 against LSU, just 26 in the Sugar Bowl win against Baylor. That this was a team in 2019 that rarely scored 30 points. They did that against non-SEC foes, the Georgia Techs and the Murray States and the Arkansas States. Found the 40-point threshold against Tennessee, but other than that, was mostly playing its SEC games in the 20s. Now this year, what has been different is that, okay, some of the points on Saturday came because of short fields, and there was also the defensive score. But still, Georgia's been above 30 points or more in every game since the beginning of the season. Now, I'm not telling you that's enough alone to help you win a national championship. But the way in which this program in the past may have been plagued by an imbalance, really good defense, not a championship-level offense, don't lose sight of the fact that regardless of who's been playing quarterback, Georgia offensively has, for the most part, been playing better than it has at any point in time in the Kirby Smart era. And now that's got to continue, and yes, you'll go back and recontextualize the Florida game and the short fields that Georgia played on and some of that kind of stuff based on what happens from here. But let's not lose sight of the fact that Georgia's actually played better offensively this season than we're used to seeing this offense play the last couple of seasons. I give Todd Monken a lot of the credit for that. He's used whatever personnel has been available to him. And once again, for the pro JT Daniels crowd, if I would have told you back in August that JT Daniels would be Georgia's starting quarterback, but the receivers he's going to throw to, he's not going to have Karis Jackson. He's not going to have Dominic Blaylock. He's not going to have George Pickens. He's not going to have, up until now, Marcus Rosemy-Jackson. Of course, Jackson played last week. Karis did. He's not going to have these guys. He's going to be throwing to, no disrespect here, but guys like freshman Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, true freshman A.D. Mitchell. Guys like this. Even though Bowers of that group was an elite recruit, these are young, inexperienced players. If I told you that, for the most part, is what JT Daniels would have had at his disposal, I think back in August, if you had been given that information, you would have told me, well, I guess that JT Daniels' numbers probably suffer by comparison. So all of this in the offensive discussion for Georgia happens around the context of they have dealt with a substantial list of injuries. But even with that, the overall bottom line level of performance has been better offensively than it's been under in the Smart era thus far. A few more comments here as we're in our R.S. Andrews cool down. David West agrees with that. Tim Tatum says short fields are a benefit of having a dominant defense, right? And they are. And obviously all of this goes together. But if you want to just kind of evaluate the offense moving forward, here's what you want to see. I do think you want to take a look at the offensive points scored. And I think you want to look at and so if you want to evaluate the offense minus the short fields, then look at yards per play. It's very, very simple. There's a lot of very complicated statistical things you can do out there. For the most part, I'm not sure making them more complicated makes them more informative. Two simple things to look at. Look at the total points scored by your offense and look at the yards per play gained by your offense. Yards per play is a pretty good cross-section of efficiency and explosiveness. That, it's possible to be explosive without being efficient. It's possible to be efficient without being explosive. But if you look at the overall yards per play, that gives you a pretty good cross-section of how explosive you are while also being efficient. And if you look at the points being scored by your offense, that's also going to be kind of a clue in that direction too, that around this time in 2019, the Georgia offense kind of fell off a cliff and they were struggling to score 21 points. Let's look against overmatched Missouri this week, against Tennessee on the road the following week, which is a little bit more of a test. Let's start looking at some of these games, and let's see if we can judge how the offense is playing. And those are, I think, two pretty good metrics to do that. Are you putting up points? Are you collecting those yards on a per-play basis? That'll give you a little bit of an idea of how things are going. Jeff Hensley says, we don't even need trolls. We have Kirby haters, the Bennett haters, and the Richter Murray haters, the Fromm haters, the Fields haters. It's ridiculous. And yeah, I understand, Jeff, that it probably seems like some of that kind of stuff is loud online, and I know this is not always the easiest thing to do, but you can't allow that to impact your enjoyment, hopefully, of what we do here on our program, DawgNation Daily, but more importantly, your enjoyment of being a Georgia fan. That it's all, for some reason, there's a weird thing about social media or, social media platforms like what we do here, that it almost feels like the negative voice is amplified. It's just going to get more attention. But you really got to try not to let that impact you. Like for me personally, I know I go through the same kind of stuff. I just simply try to ignore, the fact that there are some people that are just not going to be happy. They're just not going to. And I mean, there's probably kind of a pro. Let's just use this as an example, just to pick on one thing here for a moment. There's probably a contingent of like pro JT Daniels folks out there that if Georgia won a national championship with Stetson Bennett, they'd be disappointed because that's not the way they wanted Georgia to win a national championship. And obviously around here, all we care about is the end-of-season result. However you get there truly doesn't matter to us. We just want the result to be there. But there are some people that kind of only want the result to come a certain kind of way, and those are the people you just have to block out. People that have agendas, people that have preconceived notions about certain things. Those are the people you just got to ignore. And I know it's not always the easiest thing to do, but if you listen to someone talk for a couple of minutes, you can spot an agenda, and you just got to block that out. You just do. Let's see what else. Greg Childer says quarterback's a big deal. The offense takes on the personality of the quarterback, and I think you're 100% right about that. And I think that right now the Georgia quarterbacks are asked to do is embody the blue-collar mindset that the entire Georgia team wants itself defined by, as Nolan Smith talked about the other day. And it seems like JT Daniels is doing that. He has worked very hard to come back from injury. That's a blue-collar thing. When you're as banged up as apparently Daniels was, to the point that he couldn't throw without pain. The fact that and Daniels himself has said this, that he's been working to go through treatment. He's been pushing himself to be as healthy as he possibly can be. And if we had to guess, we'll assume that he's even still now probably not as healthy as he wants us to think that he is, if you just, educated guess based on the way that football players typically are. So that Daniels is now showing that blue-collar mindset. And Stetson Bennett is now showing that blue-collar mindset to say, hey, I've been tabbed as the quarterback before. I've had it taken away from me. I got thrust back into that role again because maybe Georgia didn't feel like I had anybody else to turn to, but I have no ego about any of it. I'm just going to do what's right for the team. That is the blue-collar mindset that he's taken on. And so I think you're right that the quarterback's overall personality has a huge impact and influence on the team, and there is a specific way in which Smart wants his quarterbacks to influence the rest of the team, and that's why I guess we'll presume that's why he's managing some of this the way that he is right now. Let's see what else. Damon Smith says, just because you think JT is what we need doesn't mean you don't pull for Stetson when he's in. That's exactly right. Damon, you're 100% right. Because here's the one thing I try to tell myself. And you can go back and think about this with the Braves from time to time. The Braves just won the World Series. If the Braves made every personnel move I wanted them to make, they probably wouldn't have won the World Series. Some of the things that I would have kind of rolled my eyes at the time have actually turned out to be pretty good. And it's the same thing as Damon's saying with Georgia football right now. The way that I allow myself to kind of, I guess, keep perspective on this is my assumption is that JT Daniels is better than Stetson Bennett if they're both fully healthy. But I also try to remind myself I'm wrong all the time. I mean, I get things wrong all the time. So who's to say that I'm figuring out this situation correctly given the limited information that I have on this. Who's to say that I'm right about that? And so that's what allows me to keep rooting just as hard for whatever quarterback's in the game or whatever players in the game at any position. Because, as I said before, if you gave me the chance to make personnel decisions for Georgia football, who to recruit, who to play, who to bench, who to do whatever else, I think over the course of time, some of my decisions would have probably turned out not to be too smart. And so that is just kind of the way that it goes on all of that. All right, we're going to get ready to go here. Let me get one or two more over at DawgNation.com for a moment. Richard D. says the Michigan State-Ohio State game could help Cincinnati. I mean, there's at least one Big Ten team making the playoff no matter what. And as I said before, yes, Michigan State get the win against Ohio State, but y'all, I don't think Michigan's done in this discussion for a long shot. I don't think Michigan embarrassed itself with how it played against Michigan State on Saturday. And I think seeing them ranked number 7 kind of gives you an indication of that there's always going to be a Big Ten team, at least one, deeply in this college football conversation here this year. Like the one thing that would help Cincinnati is, in a roundabout way, it's like Wake Forest continuing to win, because ultimately, you might as well take Cincinnati if you're going to take Wake Forest. I mean, Cincinnati would have a better win than what Wake Forest would have if it were to go on and win the rest of its games. That's the one thing that I think would help Cincinnati the most. If they can get themselves into an apples-to-apples comparison with Wake Forest, that's like the one chance you might have. But even, Mike said that he thinks that an undefeated Wake would get in over a 2-loss Alabama. I guess I probably think that's true. I mean, Alabama would beat Wake by 4 touchdowns if I had to guess, but it's a little bit hard to exclude an unbeaten for a 2-loss team. But even then, I'm not quite so sure. I don't think the appetite for undefeated Wake is all that much larger than the appetite is for an undefeated Cincinnati, and there is no appetite for an undefeated Cincinnati whatsoever. Let's get a couple more. Tony says, my guess is that after Stetson's 2 interceptions with the additional week to gain continuity with the offense, that JT is going to start against Missouri. And, maybe that's the case. And what we said was yesterday, and Tony, I appreciate the comment there, DawgNation.com, is if the directive to JT Daniels is, hey, come back to practice, fully participate, be healthy again, show this team, this coaching staff that you're the guy that you once were. If that's the directive to JT Daniels, the directive to Stetson Bennett is, we've seen you play well when there were no other options. We've seen you come in and save Georgia against Arkansas in 2020 when there was no one else that left to do the saving. We've seen you, set records against a UAB when you were the guy who was healthy that day. JT Daniels apparently could not have played against UAB. We've seen Stetson play well when he was the only option. We've also seen, I believe, Stetson Bennett play his worst football when JT Daniels, at least by appearances, was looking over his shoulder, or when Bennett was looking over his shoulder at JT Daniels. So can Stetson Bennett be the same version of Bennett with JT Daniels healthy enough to play? That would, I would think, be part of the recipe for how he holds on to this job, and obviously, clearly, he wants to do that, even though everybody's going to say the right things about working together as a team. The quarterbacks themselves clearly want to play. We're not going to pretend they don't. But Bennett's got to show you that he can play as well as needs to be played, as well as he has played at times when Daniels has been hurt. Can he still play that way when Daniels is healthy? I would say it's maybe not a coincidence that some of the worst moments for Bennett have come at a time in which there was a lot of thought out there that maybe Daniels could have played and just wasn't. And that's a lot to deal with from a mental standpoint. All right, last ones. Cody Taylor on the subject of the reclassification in the state of Georgia. This is for high school sports, this is a very, very controversial topic. What they're basically doing, if I'm understanding this correctly, is they're looking at the total student enrollment for the schools that is not in the district for that school, and they're multiplying it by 3. And so what you have is private schools and a lot of city systems where you have, a substantial number of folks who live out of district. For private schools, it's almost the entirety of the enrollment. For the city systems, the Carrolltons, the Bufords, the teams like that, it's a larger percentage of than most of the typical county-style schools. And they're multiplying that non-district enrollment by 3, which means you've got a lot of teams like flying up the classification rankings. This is clearly being done as a way of depressing the number of private schools that are winning state championships, not just in football, but across the sports. I want to say something like slightly more than half of the state championships last year were won by private schools because it's hard to know how to like slot them into the classification they're supposed to go in. And there's no guarantee that the private school is going to take this forever. Moving I think St. Pius to 7A as a for instance or something like that, if I'm remembering correctly. There's not a guarantee that these private schools are going to be happy with this. And you have some states in the country where the private schools are completely divorced from the public schools, and I think it'll be interesting to see what the private school response to all of this is. I mean, I think the state is better when you don't have the state championships quite so watered down. In other words, if you've got the publics on one side, the privates on the other, I'm not quite so sure that's giving us a true test what the very best of Georgia actually is. But for the public schools that are competing, imbalanced resources in comparison to some of these private schools, I understand their frustration too. The bottom line is there's not an easy choice to be made with this, but if you care about high school sports at all, this reclassification discussion that's been ongoing and was announced yesterday, it's a hot topic indeed. That is a hot topic indeed. All right, last one on YouTube and we're gone. Let's see what else. Eric Dukes discussing the concerns about Daniels and his health. Yeah, listen, I don't fault JT Daniels for that. Injuries are part of the game, and I don't think you do either. You're just saying it's just been a fact of life for JT that he's dealt with some injuries. And I think that's true. And as I said, that's not JT's fault. He ought to be commended for how hard he's working to get back to full health right now. But even if you stipulate he's the better of the two, you can't fully stipulate that he will remain available to Georgia for the rest of the season. He's just had some lingering issues. It's one of the reasons why I don't think you can toss Bennett aside, because you may need him again. Much the same way he was the break glass in case of emergency quarterback for you before. He might become that guy once again because Daniels is once again no longer available. That's not a criticism of Daniels. That's not a fault of Daniels. It's just a fact that when you've had injuries that have lingered for most of the season, there's a chance those injuries flare back up again, especially when it's muscular stuff that affects your ability to throw the football comfortably. I think you've at least got to consider that as a possibility. I think that's quite fair. All right, so we're going to get ready to go for today. Thanks for being here for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We appreciate you stopping by and being a part of this. We appreciate our friends at R.S. Andrews making it all possible for you. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric, that's what R.S. Andrews can do for you. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price is promised. That is a really cool thing that R.S. Andrews has just really made its hallmark. That's the way it takes good care of folks. They will show up and do big things for you like that. Heating systems, getting those things tuned up for the winter that's on its way. Of course, that's a big deal right now. And so make sure you check out rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. Also, check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC. There's also a special edition that you can pick up at, you go to the local stores right there at the newsstand right there at the front. Just grab that. I'm the kind of guy that I love, like the framed newspaper headline, Braves won the World Series. This is a good one to get, so make sure you check that out today. And there'll be plenty of coverage online, ajc.com, if you want to read more about the game, the great quotes from the locker room and the celebration, all of that online, ajc.com. But stop by a store, pick up the souvenir edition of the celebratory cover for the Atlanta Braves winning the World Series. What a cool thing that is to even say out loud. Hey, y'all, thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily here today. I hope you have a great day, and I'll look forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow.